and light squared is kind of an answer, a partial answer to both of those things. So the FCC will want it to go through. I would think what's most likely is that there will have to be a whole series of accommodations from both sides. So, for example, light squared may agree not to put its base stations too close to certain facilities, like airports. It may decide, it may turn its power down, either in general or in certain areas. And it may help to pay for a very, expedited swapping out of some of the GPS receivers for new equipment or to put on filters. But I think the emphasis will probably be on protecting health and safety. In other words, the minimum hurdle is to protect probably air navigation and public safety. But I think as far as these services such as Garmin that are going the way of the dinosaur anyway, since people can get GPS navigation on their smartphone, I don't think they're going to be that they're going to get much out of this, except the fact that since it will take years for this band to be deployed and populated, they should just immediately start to market better equipment.
And I guess just kind of as a wrap up, as we're imagining things, how should we better allocate spectrum? How could we have avoided this whole problem in the first place? If you had a perfect spectrum environment, what would you imagine it to be?
That's boy.
It's probably the longest question of all of them.
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone has a great answer to that. And it's been very popular these days particularly among telecom academics, to say that really what we need to move to is a system that establishes very clear rights concerning different frequencies of the spectrum, so that, for example, when you acquire a band of spectrum, when you get your license in the first place, it says you can do you can radiate up to a certain power level, for example, or it sets a very definite out-of-band emission that maybe takes into account who the neighbors are at that moment, and then everybody needs to be on much more clear. And then then the FCC walks away and says, the neighboring parties can negotiate with each other if one needs more or less protection. Although, it's interesting. That's what the FCC seems to be trying to do here in a way, because it thought there was clear out-of-band emissions, but since it wasn't adapted to by GPS during the intervening years, now the FCC is trying as much as possible to set up a working group for them to work this out, and what it's hoping is that it will be something like that, almost like a market model, where they negotiate for each side to pay part of the cost to resolve the issues. But that may be, the best you can do is just to be very clear about what the property, in a sense, the property rights of the license are. Although, what we believe is that in the much longer run, we have today a kind of an artificial scarcity of spectrum that has a lot to do with the fact that the government has this sort of command and control allocation and licensing of it. And we're increasingly have smart radio technologies, cognitive radio, and the use of sensing and database, internet, access database and so on, that would allow radios to share bands on a much more efficient basis. Because if you actually go out and measure the use of the spectrum, even in Manhattan or downtown Washington, D.C., less than 20% of the prime frequencies are in use on any given time or place. And so increasingly, I think we'll move to more dynamic spectrum sharing, where the technologies in an automated way will work around each other to share the spectrum on a cooperative basis, and that will give us a huge amount more capacity without all this, without sort of all the politics of and battles of a zoning system that we have today.
Absolutely. And just because you mentioned the working group, who is putting together the report that's due in June from Light Squared? Who's working on that, and is there anyone auditing it, or do you know how that? Because they're reviewing
Yeah.
the whether or not the concerns are legitimate for interference. Do you know if?
Right. So in the waiver order, the International Bureau put the onus on Light Squared to organize the working group and to submit the final report by June, and there's a deadline. The GPS community that participates, can, they really don't expect to reach consensus, and so, although there's a worry that, well, Light Squared will sort of spin the main body of the report to suggest that, that the remaining problems are minimal. Apparently the GPS industry has been promised that they can append anything they want to the report. The report then goes to the commission, and one of the conditions of the waiver is that the commission needs to be satisfied, with the working group process and the resolution of the interference issues before it gives the final okay for Light Squared to begin selling commercial services. So they can go ahead and begin deploying and testing their network, but they can't actually offer commercial services until after the report and after the FCC gives one more final okay.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's all we have time for today, and we thank you very much for your time. And it was great talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. It was great. Thanks.